So good afternoon, everyone. This is Bo from E27. Thank you for being with us here today. And before we start, let me bring up a few housekeeping announcements. So firstly, this webinar is recorded and a copy of it will be available after the event. And secondly, please type your content questions at the Q&A widget at any point during the discussion, and we will do our best to answer each and every of your questions during the Q&A segment. Finally, feel free to use the chat widget to post any technical admin questions or to interact with us during the discussion, because we'd love to hear you, so don't be shy. And this is how our agenda is going to look like today. We'll start with some opening remarks, followed by the panel discussion, and end with some Q&A and closing remarks. So now that housekeeping is done, let's talk about why we are here today. So by now, we all know how challenging it is to expand a business, not to mention internationalizing a business to other countries. The common challenges we see among a lot of startups today include the difficulty of getting connected with the right people, to get the top services, setting up the right team who understands how to hyper-localize their product there, and understanding all these different local regulations we have all over these different countries. And even preferably, getting to be able to work with all these different local regulators. So today, we have invited 3 guests who are coming from different expertise and vantage points to discuss strategies for scale-up success. So allow me to share our main discussions points today, which is being split into 3 main sections. So the first section we'll cover today is on how do startups know when they are ready to scale. Second section is on challenges and barriers to scaling a startup overseas. And last but not least, building the right team in the new market. So with that, let's dive right into our opening remarks. Today, we have with us our first guest, Charles Ferguson. Charles is the General Manager of Globalization Partners Asia Pacific, and in his capacity, he's responsible for establishing scale and efficiency for GP and their clients' business expansion in one of the most dynamic markets in the world. So before I hand this over to him, let's watch a short video.
What if you could easily expand your company into any new country within hours? Would you succeed faster? Globalization Partners simplifies international business by enabling you to hire teams in new countries without setting up foreign branch offices, and with software that puts onboarding and managing your global team at your fingertips. You find the talent and we put your team members on our already existing in-country payroll. With Globalization Partners, you never have to worry about the challenges that come with setting up international companies, managing payroll, or navigating benefits. We do it all. Are you ready to see how it works? Getting started is fast and seamless. First, you choose the country you want to expand into, then decide which benefits to offer. All from pre-selected, locally compliant employment contract terms. At the click of a button, we send our employment contract for you to review. Once approved, we issue the employment contract from our local entity to your candidate. Then our in-country HR team makes sure your candidate is comfortable with the terms of employment. With greater than 96% client satisfaction, you can be rest assured that your local candidate will be happy too. Our team members are always just a call away when you need personalized HR advice. By putting the world's talent at your fingertips, Globalization Partners enables you to succeed faster. Hire the world.
All right, Charles, over to you now.
Hey, Bo, thank you so much. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yep.
Outstanding. So look, it's wonderful to be here with the panelists and with everyone who has taken the time to join us today. I think that, much has been said. Many stories have been written. I think that'll be the shortest sentence of this panel discussion today. But I personally feel that now is a wonderful time to start looking at the other side of this pandemic and really start focusing on the opportunities that have been exposed by all of the incredible amount of change that has transpired, particularly over the past 9 months. The landscape and the fields have been plowed and are ready now for folks to get out there and start reaping the benefits of all of this unprecedented amount of, really interesting evolution and really fascinating innovation that's happened in literally every country, in literally every segment, across every aspect of the market. The acceleration of automation and digitization has obviously created a vast amount of opportunity for young companies to get out there and get amongst it. There's also an overwhelming body of evidence that shows that, multinationals by and large have also, been shaken by a lot of what has transpired, but are also very, excited and are ready to make investments, not only into their own innovations internally, but into startups. The corporate venture capital space is something I'm sure we'll touch on in the course of this conversation. It's become exceedingly clear that the route to success is directly paved by the firms that understand putting people in the center of everything that they do. And by people, I mean to say their employees and talent is paramount to being able to reap the benefit of the other side of the challenges that we've been facing for the past couple of months. And thinking about growth and demand and getting your business, whether it's a supply chain story or it's an e-commerce play or whatever it might be, understanding the impact of how the movements that have taken place this year around supply chains and getting as close as you possibly can to your prospects and clients is going to be the Rosetta Stone to your success as you start to move forward. So during the course of our conversation today, I think all of us are going to have a fairly pragmatic body of advice to give to the companies that have joined us today. But also, I'll go out on a limb and say I would imagine that Jeffrey and Ken would join me in being very optimistic about the prospects, so long as you follow some tried and true advice that perhaps we're going to share with you based upon our experience, but also just based upon successful practices. I never use the word best practices because I think that's BS, but I do like the word successful practices because success is something that you can get behind. So let's talk about some of those, and let's flesh some of those out and give you guys something really pragmatic that you can take back with you to go out and make some decisions that on the surface seem very sexy and very romantic. I've done well in this market, so now I'm going to go to the next one. But you need to do a little bit of research and do a little bit of preparation before you jump out of the airplane. Make sure there's a parachute in your backpack. So we'll talk about that. But without further ado, that's kind of like my preamble. Let's peel back some of the concepts that were brought up within the survey, and also just some knowledge that we can share with you. It looks like by far and away, folks, when they talked about which of the following were top of mind when it came to expansion, the number one area of, let's call it fear, uncertainty, and doubt, or just consternation, was the speed and complexity of setting up a local entity. So we'll certainly peel that back. Now, Bo, do you want me to go through each one of the results here, or do you want to sprinkle these through the conversation, or how would you like to proceed?
We can just do a brief overview now, but we will dive deeper later during the panel discussion. Yeah.
So number one was speed and complexity of setting up an entity, which we'll definitely talk to you about. And make no mistake, as it relates to what my firm does, we're not advocating that you shouldn't ever set up a local entity. We're going to give you some thoughts and ideas around some alternative routes to test markets or to acquire talent before you take that complex and sometimes consternating step of setting up an entity. So we'll definitely peel that one back. When we asked you what described your recruitment strategy for finding the best talent in new markets, surprise, surprise, given the fact that probably most of the firms here are technology-centric firms, everybody looked at digital recruitment resources, and LinkedIn is kind of the first go-to. It's a great resource. It's a great way to go. As evidenced by the fact that many of the folks who responded also did affirm that they use the networks of their investors, and their investors are heavily involved. And in addition, that occasionally you do use local headhunters. I think that's great. We'll talk to you a little bit more about diversifying your talent go-to-market as we get into the conversation. And the third and final question in the survey was, how do you contract your new hires in countries where you don't have a presence? And almost half the people who responded said that they use independent contractors. And again, I don't want to, this is not a sales pitch webinar, okay? But I will tell you there are some significant risks that are inherent to the independent contractor route, which we'll discuss. I'm not advocating that you shouldn't do it, but I'm just saying that there are some things you need to consider when you go down that path. So we'll get into that, but that's great. A lot of you responded, much appreciated. And I think these are appropriate questions to get your juices flowing as we talk about, the challenges you're going to face, the opportunities that you should be able to take advantage of, how to know when you're ready to scale or not to scale, when is the right time, what a blueprint might look like, and how to manage these challenges and prioritize the opportunities to tackle them with the right resources. So without further ado, I guess I'll turn it over back to you, Bo, and you can kind of kick us off.
Yep, definitely. Thank you for that, Charles. Now I believe our audience is all teased up enough for what's to come in our panel discussion. So without further ado, let me just introduce our second panelist, Jeffrey Payne. Jeff is a co-founder and managing partner of Golden Gate Ventures, an early-stage technology venture capital fund based in Singapore, investing in Southeast Asia with over US 175 million assets under management, investing in over 45 companies since 2012. So hello, Jeff. Say hi to the crowd today. Thanks for taking the time to be with us.
Thanks for having me here. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. And finally, we also have Ken Chen. Ken is the co-founder of iChef, responsible for iChef's market analysis, brand strategy, and sales strategy. Before joining iChef, Ken served as menu strategy director at McDonald's China, in charge of market operations, consumer analysis, and product strategies. Ken has even been selected as the 2015 MVP of Sales Innovation Manager from Managers Today, and he's the author of the book, Small Restaurant, Big Business. Hi, Ken, and thanks for being with us here today as well.
Hi, everyone. Glad to be here.
All right. So let me just dive right into the main section of today's webinar, which is our panel discussion. And our first section will be covering the readiness to scale portion. And I will invite Jeff first to give us his thoughts. So question for you, Jeff. From a VC's perspective, how do startups know when they are ready to scale?
Usually there's a lot of layers here. So the first thing is not all founding teams. So scaling, there are two types. There is the scaling from my first my first POC, my first customer, and then scaling from there. And then the other definition of scaling is like scaling outside your beachhead country, right, or home base. So now scaling from the first customer to the next is actually a very scary one. So for those of you who are founders, you will know. So you are in perpetual alpha mode, right? Because you're afraid that you'll fail. You're afraid of all the negative feedback that you'll get. But at some point, you have to kind of press the button. So and then stand by for all the all the crap that's coming in, right? So usually, you stand by. There's going to be like 3-4 days of no sleep, right? And then you're going to be fixing stuff, and the team has to be on standby. So if you've not done it before, then you'll start to break. If you've done it before, then you know what to do. And then obviously you try to find product market fit, and then you start to, okay, I'm more confident now. Let's go find another customer, etc. Now, whether or not you are able to go outside your home country is a very different topic. A lot of founders I know will say, I can go to 5 countries, but I know they will not go out of 1 country. So it is a founder DNA thing. Sometimes it's hard for them to do it. Sometimes it's a trust level. Sometimes it's a language thing. Sometimes it's just a culture thing. It's just not in their DNA to do it. Now, there are obviously pull factors, right? Pull factors meaning, people start looking for your solutions overseas, and then they start, trying to get you to open an office, try to find a local number, try to speak in a local language to you, etc. So all these are signals that your product might actually work in some countries. 2 is sometimes your first customer actually pushes you out to other countries, right? Their own subsidiaries, because they find you be serving them well, and then they want to push you to other subsidiaries around the region, and to me that's actually a better way to go. And then there are other reasons also. Sometimes investors or your shareholders want you to go out, right? Because your home country is so small, etc., right? Or you need to maintain your shareholding. There are copycats around the region that's going to eat your lunch, so you better go out fast, etc. So there's a bunch of reasons. So I think my last comment is just you have to know your own DNA, and then at some point you do have to push the button.
All right, thanks for that, Jeff. So now I'm going to turn to the startup's perspective, and I'm going to dig Ken's head a bit on what is that DNA that you had, or what factors did you consider that led to your decision to actually scale your business, Ken?
I mean, it's quite amazing what Jeffrey says. Actually, right. It's exactly meeting my notes. The first thing is when the day one we decided to start iChef, we want to make it a global company. We want to establish a global software company because we wanted to make it so. So it is really a DNA thing. From day one you decided whether you in what way you want this company to grow. And for us, when me and my co-founder came back to Taipei, we decided that we want to, in Taiwan, build a world-class software company that's serving small restaurant business. And so that's one thing. And second thing is definitely your pull factors. And after we have improved our POC and we start have I think about 200 restaurants using our solutions, we start to hear a lot of overseas inquiry, in particular from Hong Kong, which is the first overseas market, and inviting us, please come here, we need your help, and stuff like that. And also along with that way, we because we work closely with Apple in the starting from early period of our company, they are trying to bring us out as a good solution for application of iPad to the other market. We are leading in terms of developing it. So yes, the shareholder factor comes in and help us to go out. And last but not least, we find the right person that in the market that we connected through our connection, that trustworthy and want to work together, and both of us are confident about putting commitments together and to make these things happen. So all these factors comes in to make this growth happen.
All right, thanks for that, Ken. And I'm gonna leave that last question for Charles for this section, because I know from your experience in working with so many startups globally, what do you think are those common qualities that scaling startups usually possess? I'm sure a lot of our audience from today will want to know that as well.
It's a good question, Bo. Look, I'm gonna echo several of the points that my esteemed panelist colleagues have thrown out there, and I'll preface what I'll say by telling you that I've had a long career in multinational companies, but I've also quit several times to start up my own firms. And Ken, one of them was a jazz club and restaurant that I ran in Shanghai for a decade. I wish I had known about you back in the day, but we didn't even have iPads back in the day, so fair enough. But regardless, I can, when I hear this advice and when I read the stories, when I meet these startups that my firm, as an example, serves, the empathy that I feel is very tangible. It's real, because I remember not too terribly long ago going through these same narratives in my head. What is it going to take to be successful? Am I ready to do this? Jeffrey said something really interesting, which is, at some point you just got to, I won't use the crass analogy. I'll use the more politically correct analogy of, like, if you can't stand the heat, get out of the kitchen, right? There's one that has to do with the toilet, but I'll leave that one out. So my point is, when you're ready, but there are some fundamentals that you have to bear in mind before you make that leap. Number one, I think Jeffrey said it very succinctly, which is, product and market fit. Here's the follow-on to that from my point of view, which is, just because you're successful in Singapore, as an example, does not mean that the exact same solution and product and go-to-market and team is going to equate to success in Taiwan. I'm sure Ken can attest to that. Yeah, they're both islands, but they ain't the same, right? And so the Pareto principle comes to play here, where an 80-20 world kind of becomes relevant. And you have to be willing to take your ego and push it away from yourself, and sometimes slaughter some sacred cows in order to make what you're doing applicable and scalable in the market you're trying to go into, which segues to the next point, which is beyond product market fit, you need to have the right team. So the folks that you're going to go into these new markets with, maybe they're on your team in your local environment. That's great. And they have experience in the local market that you're trying to penetrate, or maybe you have access to folks in those particular markets, which is the best scenario. Because I think, as we all know from our own experiences, there is no substitution for that feet on the street, ear to the ground, local understanding of what's happening on a day-to-day basis. You can read about it, you can listen to the radio, you can watch the television news, et cetera, but unless you're there breathing the air, you don't really understand what's happening in those markets. And the last part that I think is really important to consider is probably one that is dear to all of us, which is it's cash flow, baby. You know, you gotta have some cash to go into these markets. You can't go in there on the back of a bunch of debt. Yeah, money's practically free right now, but there is no free lunch, right? So making sure that you're financially solvent and ready to go, because a lack of appropriate control over your P&L is the perennial killer of startups. It's not the only one, but it's one of the big ones. So those kind of three areas, right? Product market fit, having the right people on the bus, and having enough burn rate in your cash flow to fund a moonshot experiment are three of the key elements that I've seen startups, particularly in this region, leverage to success.
All right. Thank you for all your answers, guys. And I hope our audience has picked up some things already. Keep the questions coming in so that we can address them later on during our Q&A session. And if the other panelists do not have anything else to add on, then we'll move on to the second section in view of the time. All right. Yep. So let's go on to the second section, and this is on challenges in and barriers to scaling a startup overseas. So I'm going to point the first question over to you, Ken, and try to understand from the startup's perspective, what were the challenges and barriers to scaling your startup overseas, and how do you actually overcome them?
Got it. So first thing first, I would say the most important thing is whether you can see your value in that market. Before you deciding to go into the market, can you see whether you are actually bringing value to the market, rather than, oh, this market is good, I want to have a presence, I want to capture market share there. You need to ask that question to yourself first. Can you bring value to them? So after that, I think the most important thing is to still go back to the people. As I shared before, I should have the privilege and the fortune to have a very fabulous partners in Malaysia, Hong Kong, and Singapore, and they basically figure out all these like registration and all these company setup things, and they even be able to contribute some content of how to use like visa to actually work in that country. They all figure it out themselves for us. So we're very fortunate. So to having the right people is the most crucial thing. But the question is how to have them, right? How to find them, how to build partnership, and having the right way of working together. So the way of having these kind of people actually is you have to be there and talk to them. You might want to go for our experience. We will visit the current industry player that they working in a similar industry, but might in different kind of country. They also doing restaurant supply, and they are relevant to technology. They have a reputation of being active and passionate about their work. We'll engage with them and telling them we are exploring partner that we want to work with, and bring our solution to the market. And that's one way of finding them. And second way actually we're doing is acquiring, basically. So you will find each country have a passionate young people or startup that want to start their business or want to contribute to the home market and want to join an international venture, and might be a good fit for you. And working together, you help them to scale their business and join a bigger platform. And there are a couple like incentive metrics that you can design in, like no matter it's definitely there's some options, or you can design a cash or a revenue profit sharing on a local market, couple of tools you can use. But through that, you show your commitments, right? You show your commitment that we want is a win-win situation. We respect and we need your support on local market. You will have your ownership there, and from there we can both share the fruit of success together. So you need to design a metric to share the success and build the commitment together. And the last thing, but not this, is the challenge is to build international corporate management metrics. Again, even though we are a startup, that makes us really cool that we don't care about the rules. But at the end of the day, that management still management, right? You still come back, you have marketing on your home market and or your overseas market, how they create alignments. Then you will have a product development needs from local market and home market, how you arrange priorities. You still need a mechanism to talk about it, and how to rank resource allocations. It will be a pity that all your like overseas market are all separated or independently. And in this case, you don't actually need them to work together. So you need to come up a way to actually create alignments and become a teamwork for all the market you have all together, rather than just colonizing them that to capture revenue from them. So that's a couple of main challenges, I would say. And we are still in a learning process. So I feel a little embarrassed of sharing how to overcome the challenge. I guess I'm more in the role of sharing what challenge we are having right now.
Thanks for those insights, Ken. And actually, I'm really curious that, in fact, like, was there actually a mistake that you made during your experience so far when trying to scale a startup overseas? So this can serve as a reminder for our startups that are hearing our conversation today, so that they don't repeat this mistake. Something that you want to remind them based on their experience. Anything?
Well, not too many. So
maybe the most significant one. Yeah, Ken.
If I'm going to pick one, we were we made this mistake several times actually, and then we later on figure out it's the same mistake, that you will find yourself motivated to work with the most resourceful partner in that market. If you have someone really sexy and have a lot of resources, and you choose to work with them because they have more money or have more resources, and they always turn out to be a bad decision. Because they always have the most of the options. You just have one pity, like partnership they might choose to work with. They will work with you out of their conveniency, but they could be your lifeline. So there's a different level of commitments from both sides, from either side. So never work out later on. But we found that if you're working with a committed talents, young people, and enthusiastic and open-minded, that is a closer way to success. That is our experience.
That is interesting. Thanks for that, Ken. All right, now let's hear from the VC's perspective. Jeff, what do you think are the common challenges and barriers that startups face when they're scaling to new markets? And do you have any advice for them on overcoming these challenges?
The common denominator is they don't do enough research in the front. And when they have a little bit of success back home, they get distracted a little bit. So for example, you get so those who are a little bit green, or this is their first company, they usually get requests to license, white label, and joint venture. Right? This is a very typical thing. And then if you don't know what you're doing, then you'll be like, oh, let's hop on a plane, let's go to that country and try to figure out who that guy is and try to see what he wants and all that. And you are completely distracted from your home base. You haven't done research. Why are you on a plane? So that's the first one. And then everything else boils down to timing, competitors, and how do you launch in a country, right? Sometimes you hire someone to do launching for you. Sometimes you do it yourself. Sometimes you hire the team before you do it. So there are different ways of attacking it when you're going out. But more importantly, I think is usually the management team back home or back in the HQ, they haven't done the complete research and as such convince the team back home that, you know, this is what they're supposed to be doing, right? Because you know, distractions, resources are needed. You know, the founding team, usually one of the founders have to disappear for like 3 to 6 months. So all that needs to be taken into account. And if you're new at this, you completely get, you know, sideswiped because you don't know what's coming your way. So I think I think founders do need to ask other founders who have done it, especially in your sector, or if you're B2B, you know, talk to guys who does B2B. If you're B2C, right? So sometimes you're hiring your local community team. Sometimes you are hiring a, you know, sales and ops team. So you need to understand how you do it. So I think the more data you know, the less mistakes you'll make.
All right, thanks, Jeff. But you mentioned a lot about research, and is there any specific like area of research or like, you know, tips for our startups today that's hearing from us today, or like which area should they be researching about? Like what are they supposed to research about? Yeah.
I think Ken probably have a, you know, his own version. I think every business have your own playbook.
Yeah.
So but then your playbook is very localized to where you're from. The reality is a 70-30 rule, meaning 70% of a playbook will relate in other countries, but sometimes it may completely sideswipe you. So for example, you may be doing a B2C business, and then you go to Indonesia, and then you find that you're too early. Then you have to do a B2B to C business.
Yeah.
Right, because the C in Indonesia do not trust anything. Right? They don't trust businesses. Right. So when you launch in Indonesia, the first thing they do is they look at your website, then they look at your address, then they look at your number, and then they try calling your number to make sure there are people there. Sometimes they drive past your office to make sure there's actually human beings inside the office, because they don't. It's just their nature. They don't trust, right? So when you do, so you need to understand culture.
Yeah.
You need to go to that country a lot. You need to understand a lot of things. So it takes a lot of preparation.
Okay. All right. Thanks for that, Jeff. So cultural like factors, I guess, is a very important factor. So for startups today, please take note of that. And last but not least, Charles, from these many startups you have worked with globally, what are the common challenges and barriers that startups face when scaling overseas? And do you have any advice on overcoming these challenges as well?
Yeah, look, again, I'm in the distinct advantage of going after the two gentlemen who've already shared fabulous pearls of wisdom, so I can say ditto. But let me add a couple of pieces of color to it as well. I think you know, when it comes to the research aspect that Jeffrey just alluded to, don't neglect the banal, boring, perceived things like tax and compliance and accounting and human resource policy and things of this nature. And I'll sort of underline that by giving you some food for thought. So in 2008, just after the initial shock wave of the great financial crisis happened, in the first 6 months post the GFC, right? 15,000 new pieces of legislation were released around the world to begin to try and put some ring fencing and some framework around not only at the national level sort of connectivity and liquidity around the financial markets, but also some semblance of, you know, connectivity to the global market, right? Just within the first 6 months. Now, if you fast forward to today and you think about how much news have you guys seen over the past 7 months about stimulus bills being thrown into budgets for governments, right? Including here in Singapore. Billions and billions, trillions of dollars, right, have been pumped into the global economy under the auspices of stimulation to get the economy back on its feet and to help folks, and rightly so. But here's the thing, you know, that didn't fall from the sky, right? So governments are going to come back and say, okay, now it's time to find ways and means by which to refill those coffers. And a lot of that is beginning to push a little bit of further regionalization and to some extent nationalization around the labor forces, okay? So when you start thinking about going into these new markets, there are a whole host of new regulations and compliances that have come out over the past 6 months that are specifically designed to protect the interests of any one particular country's local employees. If you go into these markets and you're not aware of the different types of social benefits that have been put into place, or the different types of tax regulations that have been, very quickly put into motion to facilitate this aid that's been put out there, if you go against the sort of the tide, you will be crushed by no fault of your own. You got a great team, you got a great strategy, you got a great, balance sheet, and you go in there, and if you're not ready for the boring stuff, you will be crushed. So what's my advice? My advice is do the research, right? Understand what's out there. You can work with partners like GP. You can reach out to local FDI boards like Economic Development Board or Enterprise Singapore or Invest Hong Kong, or the list is as long as my arm, right? There are international chambers and trade associations. There are incubators and accelerators. There are universities. Like, there's this thing called the internet, right? So don't be lazy, do the research, ask the hard questions, focus on the things that might seem banal and boring, compile them all out, and then go out and talk to other startups and other competitors and other customers that you're already serving, and kind of calibrate, right? And then you have a much better foundation for being able to scale with all the sexy side of what it means to expand into a new market. But you got to get your ducks in a row first. Due diligence is, nobody's going to put cash in your business if you don't know what the hell you're talking about when somebody asks you, what's the regulatory environment in Taiwan? And you say, I have no idea. Well, guess what? That sucks because you're not getting my money, right? So think clearly and think about it through the lens of, would I invest in this? Would I want to buy this product? Would I feel safe? And then take it from there.
Thank you, Charles. I think those are really good tips from all three of our panelists on how a startup can overcome their challenges when scaling overseas. So taking note of the time, with that, we are going to move right into the last section for today's panel discussion, and that is on building the right team in the new market. And I'm going to give the first question for Jeff. And Jeff, how important is it, do you think, to hire the right people to the new market, and the challenges in achieving this? And what's their talent strategy, turnaround time, building a team via their methods?
It's my feeling is it takes time. So definitely, when you do your research, you understand the culture, you go there quite a bit. You slowly understand what type of personality, what type of team setup is needed to execute this. And the team also needs to sync with your HQ's culture, right? So sometimes your HQ culture doesn't fit that foreign country, so you need to be aware. But I think the first thing is really to research and make sure that your leadership side, the direction to expand is clear, so that the entire company understands why. And it's okay to tell the team that we don't know, let's try it out, and and if I fail hiring, or if I fail 6 or 9 months, let's say B2C doesn't work, and then maybe I'll try again at B2B. So as long as everyone knows that you are taking the risks and it's calculated risk, then I would say just go ahead. My feeling is your first couple of hires, depending on who you hire, is probably going to be the wrong one. So I think it's a similar formula when you hire a dev shop, right? So if you want to hire a dev shop in India or Vietnam, your first 2 dev shops just gonna suck, right? Because you don't know what you're doing, right? So only once you get to know a hang of it, then you realize, okay, this is not really what I want. So just have a bunch of sort of plan B, plan C, escape routes thought through, and then you'll be fine. And as long as the entire company is supporting the leadership, you should be okay.
Yep. All right. Sounds a bit like a rapid prototyping process, right, Jeff? Yeah. All right. Next, Ken, from your perspective, then, how critical is it, for you to build a strong team in a new market when you scale your business overseas? And what is your current strategy?
Okay, so given the uncertainty that you will face when you're entering a new market, as Jeff has said, you will have to make research. We had the privilege of doing our startup a little bit older as agent when we become a co-founder, that we were 30 something and have been working in corporate and other company. I've been working in Uruguay, Israel, and that kind of places. I actually do my due diligence before I do my homework before I start my business. But a lot of I found a lot of new friends, young friends who doing startup did not actually have experience. So that's one very key thing to share. Do your homework. And labor policy, labor law. The first people I talked with when I arrived Singapore was lawyers. We want to know what is the actual status of the establishing company, the hiring policy, because try to be responsible for your future staff, right? You want to then, if you be able to convince the right person who want to work with you, want to work with a company that actually can last, not for like 4 weeks, but actually be able to run. So given that uncertainty you will face in the new market, that definitely is crucial. You need the team that be able to respond and adjust themselves. And you need the support from leadership for sure to make sure the local teams have the flexibility and the support to make things right. It is not about hiring the right team, it's about making the team right, I would say. So starting, for example, in Singapore, we start by hiring. We have a very ambitious goal, and after done all the research and homework, we start by hiring a team of 4. We have a 4 task force to get started, but soon we find ourselves have to fire about 2 to 3 after 6 months and figuring out, okay, this plan is not working, and we need to reconstruct the whole way of doing business. The channel have to change, and we were fortunate enough to having the right team and the spirits to make things happen. Make self-suggestion for more than 5 or 6 times in a year. To, as I said, it's a pivot process. You have to change. You make assumption that you don't know, so you have to try. You have to change it. So the tactic we're doing, we are actually 100% local. No matter our Malaysia, our Hong Kong, or our Singapore team, the 100% local, and we will send. At the early stage, we will send our like sales training representative or our training manager to the local market to help them to understand how to use our product and to connect them with the HQ in terms of resource allocations and to know what they need and build some common language. But the day-to-day decision, the resource allocation, marketing strategy, partnership decision, everything is done by local team.
All right. Thank you, Ken, for all these insights. Finally, we have Charles to wrap this section up. So Charles, over to you. Why should startups act fast in building the right time? And what are the usual challenges that scaling startups face when it comes to recruitment?
Well, look, I think it's pretty clear that, anytime there's kind of a sort of a tumultuous period or a calamitous period in the global markets, it's a great time to, number one, consider making investments, right? It's not rocket science. It's a little bit counterintuitive to some people, and logic is, I guess common sense isn't always so common, right? But buy low, sell high seems to be kind of pretty good advice to me. And I think that when markets are scared and running around and there's all this confusion, et cetera, those companies that kind of rise above that confusion and start to really look for the opportunities are the ones that are going to be successful on the backside of these types of events like the pandemic, as an example. And that's not only germane to making investments and growing into a new market, it's also relevant to taking advantage of this probably once in our lifetimes opportunity to get some of the best talent in the world, right? So why I say that, because think back, I'll give you an example, using a tech example just to put a fine line on it. Just post World War II in California, specifically in San Francisco, Hewlett Packard, the venerable HP organization, was kind of a pretty small business at the time. And what had happened was that there were a multitude of really talented scientists and engineers that were employed by the United States government in and around that kind of, Santa Clara, sort of around the valley, down in San Francisco, et cetera. And as the war effort started to wind down, they had to let go. These defense labs let all these people go, right? And so the economy was also going down. They were heading into a massive recession there in the United States. And what the leaders of Hewlett Packard decided to do was to double down and sweep up all this incredible talent that was being furloughed, retrenched at the time. And fast forward about 24, 36 months later, when the economy started to pick back up again, they had this monopoly of some of the most technically advanced and experienced engineers and scientists that you could find anywhere on Earth, right? So that was a very difficult decision to make, but it turned out to be the right decision. Now, let's fast forward to the 21st century pandemic. I'm not suggesting to you that you should go out and spend all of your cash flow on hiring all these people and wait for the world to turn around. What I'm suggesting is that you need to understand the types of talent that you want to acquire. And by and large, the reality is, and I think Ken very eloquently described it, you really do need to focus on hiring in the local markets. I mentioned it as a little bit of a segue with respect to the fact that countries and regions are starting to nationalize to a very large extent, or at least regionalize. But let's look back pre-COVID, right? So if you think about global trade and globalization as a concept, the reality is that for the past 10 years or so, the vast majority of trade that has taken place for the Asia-Pacific markets and economies has actually taken place intra-regionally, within the region, right? The FDI flows have been predominantly Asian market to Asian market. Similarly for the EU for even greater period of time, 25 plus years. And even in North America, where it used to be the case that it was kind of a China-US trade sort of tick for tack sort of investment scenario, now America's largest trade partner is actually Canada. So my point of bringing that up is to say, think about the fact we've just signed this RCEP here between ASEAN and kind of our big five brothers, right? Australia, New Zealand, Japan, Korea, and the PRC. You think about that trade block and the opportunities that are available in order for you to get understanding of the nuances in these markets, right? The nuances meaning, for example, you say, let's go to Vietnam. Well, Vietnam has 4 sub-regions. Do you understand them? Do you know how they work? Indonesia has thousands of islands. Do you understand how to trade and get access between Sumatra and Java? Do you understand the Philippines has 5 sub-regions? Like, you need someone on the ground to help you, dude, right? So my advice is, instead of dropping in and setting up the entity and going full hog and doing the paid up capital and getting the licenses that are required for paying, doing payroll taxes and benefits administration, et cetera, reach out to a partner like a Globalization Partners as an example. We have an entity already set up in any market you want. We're in 187 countries around the world. You find the talent, we will onboard them for you, we will pay them for you, we will administer their benefits for you. And in 6 to 12 months, you make the decision you want to go for it, pull the trigger, go for it. And we'll help you transfer them onto your vehicle. If you decide it's not the right market, you haven't made that crazy investment into that market. You don't have to unwind the entity, which is often far more painful than setting it up. And lastly, let's say you don't want to go to any market at all. You just want to capture talent and ultimately relocate them to your home market potentially, because there's great talent all over this region. Use a vehicle like this to attract and retain that talent. And so you decide, maybe you do want to go in the market, maybe you don't, but you want to capture that unique opportunity of once in a lifetime, these folks are available. So I think it's an incredible time to be out there in the market. I think it's an awesome time to be hiring, but you have to use your head.
Thank you for sharing these use cases, Charles. Really interesting and really insightful. And I believe it will really enlighten our audience today on how these solutions can help startups to scale when it comes to recruitment. So let me now turn to the room and open the floor for questions from the audience. I believe we have a couple of questions from them already. And first one is from Mohan Deep. Is it a good idea to work with local partners instead of setting up the business yourself from scratch and hire people overseas? Anyone want to take that, panelists?
I'm biased, so I'll let my two gentlemen friends here answer first, and then maybe I'll chime in.
I guess I'll pick last one. So it really depends, right? It really depends on how they see this market. There's a different level of commitments that you can make So from the lightest level is you find you do like cross-border e-commerce. You don't actually have any partner in the region. You're just using shipment surveys and payroll surveys online and taking order and shipping, make things happen. So a little bit deeper than that is you actually have a local distributor. This, I guess, is the case we're talking about. So you have a distributor to represent you or helping you to organize the logistic and all these things, and that is kind of a partnership you might have. But they only give you a very limited capacity of making changes and make things happen. And to the deeper level is you call you build everything from scratch. You actually hire a team, you build things up and do all the things. And how to choose among these options is really depends on how much opportunity you can get from the local market, right? If it is a very valuable market, you want to make sure you get 100% chance out of it, you need to build it from the bottom up. But if you find it is a limited opportunity, but relatively complicated and costly to establish an entity or presence there, it is smarter to have working with the local partner to work together. It really depends on A, the size of opportunity of a local market, and then B, the cost for you or the complexity for you of managing the business down there.
All right, thanks, Ken. In view of the time, right, I'm going to pick one last question before we move into the closing remarks. And we have a question from Volodymyr. He's asking, if you're in a 0 point today, just starting your journey, what is the first market you'd consider if you don't have a specific product, but looking for an idea and explore with open mind?
Singapore.
So that question is for all of us?
Yep, he's apparently to all panelists. So if you guys have any answers, feel free to share with.
Well, I will start it with the restaurant example, okay? If you are a chef and you try to start your career building a business in the restaurant business, how do you pick a market and how to start from point zero? You will pick a big market, an open and a big market, and selling things that you're familiar with. You don't want to block yourself in a small market, which have no dynamic and zero opportunity, but you also don't want to put yourself in the shoes of selling things that you don't understand. So you want to move into a big market that actually high dynamic, but doing the business that you understand, then to capture opportunity. That was what I would do. But for all of us, each of us have different level of familiarities on different market or subjects. So it really goes down to for each one have different assets.
Thanks, Ken. There's one question specifically for you, Charles. I hope you can answer that. That's from David. Could it make sense to set up a company in a new market for sales and marketing, but use a company such as yours for talent until the new company has enough size to justify bringing talent on the local company payroll?
Yes. So let me be more specific.
Yep.
Look, when companies typically go into a new market, as an example, and this example makes a lot of sense, you know, the first folks that they're going to potentially drop into that market are going to be folks that have the skill sets and the acumen to understand how to do the BD, right? To really acid test, you know, what we do as a firm and does it fit in this market. It very well could be the case that the product solution you have to bring to the market is very sophisticated, vis-a-vis that which is already in the new expansion area that you're trying to go for. So bringing a sales and marketing expert in to kind of plant the flag as a beachhead, and then use those folks and their acumen and their kind of gravitas to go out and establish that thing that I think it was either obviously Jeffrey or Ken mentioned earlier, which was, you know, showing the commitment to the market, right? Bringing some seniority to play, bringing some expertise into that market, and using that to go out and attract the new local talent and then train them. That's the classic model, right? Every company I've worked for, particularly American firms, you know, I worked for Salesforce.com when they launched out in Asia, and they did that. You know, different parts of ADP, different companies that came out here and they planted the flag with import, talent, sales and marketing, and they grew from there. So I think it's a great methodology for sure.
Thanks, Charles, for that. I hope that answers your question, David. And before we officially end the session today, understanding we have so much to take in today, whether it's the insights, the use cases, the examples provided during the session. So may I invite each of our panelists to provide like a key closing statement for our audience to take away today? Perhaps we could start with Ken first.
Follow your DNA.
All right. How about Jeff?
Don't scale too fast.
Okay.
Yeah, so go at your own pace. Every founding team have their own pace. Don't be influenced by your investors or shareholders to or even your competitors to make you go a bit crazy.
Yeah.
And then always have leverage. So in your core markets, do it yourself. Do not partner. In harder markets like Japan, maybe you should partner. But you usually have your core market first, and then Japan probably is a second market. But if it's extremely hard for you to go in, then partner.
All right, thanks, Jeff. And last but not least, Charles.
Yeah, I agree with my colleagues. Don't go over your skis, I guess is a great way to put it, but definitely do act with urgency, because the window of opportunity, particularly given all these confluences that are happening right now, is relatively narrow. And you know what? Don't forget to celebrate success, okay? You guys are still here. You've got ambition, and you're probably not aware of the fact that you've completely transitioned to a remote world. So pat yourself on the back and celebrate that, and use it to your advantage.
All right, once again, thank you so much, Jeff, Ken, and Charles, for being with us here today. Your insights are greatly appreciated. Thank you for always supporting the community, and I believe our audience today has taken away an abundance of knowledge from you guys today. But before we go, be sure to check out Globalization Partners by visiting their website. You may scan the QR code on the screen, and do follow us on social media to get the latest news on everything related to the startup ecosystem. I would also like to thank everyone for joining us here today, and stay tuned for there are more webinars to come in the future. Have a great week, everyone, and stay safe.
Thank you guys. Take care.